In the stillness before dawn, when the world lies silent and every breath seems to echo against the walls of existence, a question rises like a whisper that refuses to fade. What if you learned to control everything you feel and nothing could shake you? This question lingers not as a fantasy, but as a haunting possibility, a doorway to a life where chaos loses its claws. We walk through life convinced that our emotions own us, that fear, anger, heartbreak, and failure are storms we must simply endure. But what if the storm could rage and yet our spirits remained unbroken, like a silent mountain above the thunder? The ancient philosopher Epictetus once wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself, and yet we drift, prisoners of impulses we never learn to command." This is where our journey begins. In the very place most people turn away from the battlefield within ourselves. We're the fiercest enemies, we're our own faces. We were not born weak. Somewhere along the way, we simply forgot. Life's blows, society's noise, and the pressure to feel everything loudly have shaped us into fragile beings who shatter at the slightest disappointment. But the truth waits in the shadows. Strength has always been a choice. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who carried the weight of a collapsing empire, wrote in his journal, "If the mind is disciplined, the body will follow." Discipline, what a terrifying word. It means responsibility. It means acknowledging that we are not victims of emotions, but their architects. When anger boils or anxiety corrodes us from within, we tend to blame circumstances. Yet our ancestors of iron, those who followed reason over impulse, knew something we avoid. Emotions do not define us. How we respond to them does. And in that response, destiny is quietly forged. Imagine for a moment, standing face to face with fear, not running, not trembling, simply breathing, truly breathing. The Stoics believe that every emotion is a message, not a commander. Happiness, sadness, rage, desire, letters delivered to the door of consciousness. The choice is whether we open them. If you are distressed by anything external, Aurelius wrote, "The pain is not due to the thing itself, but your estimate of it." So many of us spend our lives trying to control the world, yet never once try to control the world within. We grasp at people, success, validation, pleasure, as if they might calm the turbulence inside us. But control cannot be found in anything outside. The one who does not master their emotions will lose everything trying to control circumstances. The one who does master them loses nothing, not even peace. There is a brutal beauty in emotional self-control. It does not promise comfort, it promises transformation. The fire does not stop burning, but we become of a material that does not melt. Seneca once warned, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." How many battles have we fought that never existed? How many wounds have we reopened ourselves again and again and again? To control what you feel is not to silence emotions, nor to pretend they do not exist. It is to look them in the eye and say, "You do not command me." When sadness arrives, we sit with it. When anger rises, we observe it. When fear screams, we listen but do not kneel. That is not numbness, that is power. And when we rise with that power, we rise not as individuals, but as a collective of those who refuse to be ruled by the storms that destroyed our former selves. Still, the question remains the same that echoed in the first breath of this story. What if nothing could shake you? Not because life became easier, but because you became harder to break. What if your heart could remain calm in failure? What if betrayal could not poison your spirit? What if grief could visit you but never destroy you? Somewhere deep inside, we already know the answer. We feel it like a calling. We sense that our potential has been caged not by fate, not by chance, but by surrendering control to the emotions that were meant to be our tools. The day we reclaim control over what we feel is the day we become unshakable. And that day does not come by waiting. It starts now, here at the edge of this question that has followed us since the first word. What if you learn to control everything you feel? The path ahead grows darker before it grows clearer, because to master emotion is to confront the very parts of ourselves we have spent a lifetime avoiding. It is easy to display strength when life is gentle, but true control is forged in moments when everything seems to collapse, when someone lies to us, when a dream fails, when we are humiliated, when the world turns its back. These are not the times that break us, but the times that reveal us. The Stoics looked at adversity not as punishment, but as training. The hardships you face are not there to weaken you. They are preparing the version of you capable of withstanding storms greater than any you have faced before. Difficulties strengthen the mind, Seneca wrote, just as labor does the body. If we allow pain to refine us rather than define us, we become something rare, a human being who does not crumble when the ground shakes. There is a dangerous misunderstanding in the world that controlling emotions means living without sensitivity. False. It means feeling deeply without letting those feelings rule decisions, identity, or destiny. The Stoics were not cold, they were unshakably warm because they loved without fearing loss, hoped without fearing failure, and cared without expecting control. They did not suppress emotion, they chose how to experience it. A warrior does not hide from the battlefield, he enters prepared. So we do with emotion. When joy comes, we embrace it without clinging. When sadness comes, we welcome it knowing it will pass. When fury comes, we tame it before it burns what we love. We stop asking the world to silence the chaos around us and instead learn to silence the chaos within. And suddenly, almost impossibly, we begin to respect ourselves. But there is something even greater when self-mastery spreads from the individual to the collective. One person who conquers emotions becomes a light in the darkness for many who are still trapped. It creates a silent brotherhood, a family not bound by blood, but by discipline and clarity. We begin to see ourselves in others, and others in ourselves. We realize that we are not alone in suffering, nor alone in the fight to rise. Every human heart is a battlefield. Every human mind is a fortress that can be built. And when we master what is within us, we become the kind of people who no longer harm others because of their own wounds. We become steady, we become safe, we become dependable, we become the calm presence others didn't know they needed. True strength is not loud. True strength is the one who remains peaceful when peace seems impossible. Yet the temptation to surrender is always waiting. There will be days when everything inside screams for escape. Days when discipline feels like a burden, when control feels like a cage, when the world appears too heavy to resist. That is where many turn away. They trade long-term power for temporary comfort and call it relief. But relief fades and regret endures. We are not shaped by the days we feel strong, we are shaped by the days we feel weak and choose strength anyway. And this choice does not need applause, validation, recognition, or reward. It is a silent victory, invisible to the world, but unmistakable to the soul. First, tell yourself what you would be, Epictetus wrote, and then do what you have to do. In that sentence lies the entire blueprint to an unshakable life. Define the self you seek to become, and then behave as that self, even when emotion tries to tempt you elsewhere. The story is not ending, it is circling back to the beginning. Because the question that started it all still hovers in the air like smoke. What if you learned to control everything you feel, and nothing could shake you? The answer is no longer distant. You have seen glimpses of it in the lines of this journey, in the strength of the ancient words, and in the quiet echo of your own potential. Emotional control is not a fantasy. It is a path, brutal, demanding, relentless but real. A path walked by giants before us. And now the question is no longer what if. The question becomes, are you willing to become that person? Because the only thing standing between who you are and who you could be is mastery over what you feel. And once you master that, the world loses the power to shake you, not because it becomes gentle, but because you become unbreakable. There comes a moment in every journey towards self-mastery when the battle is no longer against the world, but against the part of us that clings to weakness. This is where most people retreat, because it is easier to blame circumstances than to confront the truth in the mirror. Yet every individual who has ever achieved inner dominance walked through this crucible. They realized that emotions are not enemies, but forces requiring direction. Like fire, emotion can warm or devour depending on how we wield it. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by war, betrayal, and death, yet he reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. These words were not poetry. They were survival, and now they become ours. We begin to see that nothing is more terrifying or liberating than admitting that our inner state belongs only to us. Think of every time someone insulted you, betrayed you, walked away from you, humiliated you, doubted you. Think of how easily you gave them control over your emotions. In those moments, they didn't need weapons. They used your own feelings against you. That is why emotional control is not something small, it is the final evolution of human strength. The one who can be calm in the face of disrespect cannot be manipulated. The one who can face loss without crumbling cannot be enslaved. The one who can feel pain without surrendering is no longer fragile. The Stoics understood that no enemy is more dangerous than the one who can turn your emotions into chains. So the path to freedom is simple and brutally direct. Reclaim those emotions. They may still appear, but they will no longer dictate your actions. And the world will notice, because nothing threatens the weak more than the presence of the unshakable. But what does control look like in practice? It is not smiling through suffering, nor pretending not to care. It is acknowledging emotion fully, without becoming its servant. When anger rises, you pause. When fear trembles, you breathe. When grief tightens the chest, you allow it, yet you keep moving. There is power in refusing to let emotion alter your principles. Epictetus wrote, "Circumstances do not make the man, they only reveal him to himself." When chaos strikes, we do not become strong or weak, we simply discover which one we already were. And if we do not yet like what we find, it means the work ahead is clear. We do not train for a life free of difficulty. We train for a life where difficulty no longer dictates our character. Mastery is not about emotional numbness, it is about emotional discipline. And discipline, once earned, becomes peace. As we walk this path, something remarkable happens. The world begins to change, not because it becomes easier, but because our perception becomes sharper. The same events that once overwhelmed us now teach us. The same people who once hurt us now fail to penetrate our inner walls. The same failures that once defined us now strengthen us. The world does not stop testing us. We simply stop failing the test. We realize that the things we once feared losing were never the source of our peace. Peace was always something internal, waiting to be built, brick by brick, through choices. And once we choose emotional control often enough, it becomes instinct, it becomes nature, and one day, without knowing when it happened, we look in the mirror and see someone new, someone we used to admire from afar but never believed we could become. And now we return once again to the question that began this journey. What if you learned to control everything you feel, and nothing could shake you? The answer appears not as fantasy, but as reality glimpsed between every word of this path. It is not a distant ideal, it is a decision moment by moment, emotion by emotion, day after day, until mastery is no longer effort but identity. When that day arrives, life will still be uncertain, people will still disappoint, time will still take everything, and yet you will stand as something unbreakable, not empty, not cold, not detached, but powerful beyond anything you imagined. Because you will no longer fall with every emotional wave that once drowned you. You will have become the solid ground beneath them, and on that day you will finally understand, control what you feel, and the world will never control you again. There comes a point when emotional mastery stops being a pursuit and becomes a transformation so deep that everything inside shifts. It is the moment when you stop reacting and start choosing. When you realize that every emotion asking for control is simply a test of who you decided to become. The greatest minds of the ancient world all agreed on one truth. Self-command is the highest form of power available to a human being, not wealth, not reputation, not victory. Power over the inner world. A person can lose everything and remain unbroken if they govern themselves. That is why emperors studied philosophy and warriors studied stillness, because strength without self-control destroys, and strength with self-control builds. When emotion no longer drags us blindly, we step into a level of life where clarity is not temporary, it becomes the air we breathe. The strange irony is that the more control we gain, the less we need to prove anything to anyone. We stop raising our voices, stop explaining our worth, stop chasing validation, stop defending ourselves unnecessarily. Silence becomes confidence, not avoidance. Restraint becomes dominance, not weakness. Aurelius wrote, "For his own eyes only. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one," and that sentence pierces the soul, because it reveals the truth. We already know the person we should be. We simply do not act like them consistently. Emotional control is the bridge between who we are and who we are capable of being. It is the discipline of refusing to betray your highest self, even when frustration, insecurity, or fear beg you to. Over time, the inner battlefield takes shape. Emotions show up like old enemies testing whether we have grown. Anger knocks first, with its familiar fire. Then doubt, whispering poison. Then sadness, with its heavy hands. Then desire, disguised as comfort. And every time one of them appears, we have a choice not to fight them, but to stay centered while they pass. Like standing in a hurricane without losing balance. Like holding a burning coal without letting it scorch the mind. This is where self-respect is forged, not in ease but in resistance without resentment. When a person becomes calm not because life is gentle, but because their spirit is immovable, they become the kind of presence others do not forget. People feel something in them, something steady, something grounded, something rare. But even with mastery, life will strike. It will take people you love, it will collapse plans, it will betray expectations, and in those moments, the world will expect you to break. Yet there is a point when pain begins to sharpen rather than shatter you. When grief becomes gratitude for what existed. When disappointment becomes direction. When endings become evolution. The Stoics taught that nothing we love is ever truly ours, everything is borrowed, and one day must be returned. So instead of clinging, we learn to appreciate fiercely while prepared to release. That is the most powerful form of love, not possession but presence. And when we live that way, pain may ache, but it cannot steal what defines us. Because the foundation of our peace no longer lies in what we have, but in who we are. And now the circle tightens once again. The question that began this journey, what if you learned to control everything you feel, and nothing could shake you, is no longer a distant echo. Perhaps somewhere along these words you have already begun to feel the shape of the answer. Control is not perfection, it is intention, it is discipline, it is choosing who leads reason or impulse. If you choose reason enough times, the world loses its claws. That is when nothing external can pull you away from your path. That is when adversity trains instead of destroys. That is when emotions become allies rather than prisons. When that day arrives, you will not feel invincible, you will feel unshakably calm. And in that calm, the answer that once haunted you will finally speak for itself. There comes a final threshold in this path, the point where the journey turns inward one last time, not to struggle, but to understand. For so long we fought emotions like enemies, guided them like wild beasts, endured them like storms, and now, suddenly, we see their true nature. They were never meant to be conquered through fear or suppressed through force. They were meant to be mastered through awareness. We learn that control does not mean rigidity. It means flexibility without collapse. It means walking through chaos with a steady spine, knowing that nothing outside can uproot what has been solidified inside. In this state, every challenge becomes something sacred, a teacher dressed in discomfort. Every loss becomes a reminder to love more consciously. Every failure becomes a step toward a wiser self. The world continues its relentless pace, but we no longer run after it. We walk beside it, and slowly, something extraordinary starts happening around us. People begin to notice a discipline they cannot name but can feel. They turn to us during conflict because we do not escalate it. They trust us because we do not bend with emotional wind. They open their hearts because they sense that ours is not governed by insecurity or ego. We become, without realizing, the stability others search for but rarely find. Not because we are perfect or fearless, but because we are unshaken. The Stoics spoke of becoming a citadel of the soul, a fortress that stands even when everything else falls. Yet this fortress does not close others out, it shelters. Emotional control does not isolate, it elevates. It allows us to protect rather than attack, to inspire rather than demand, to lead without dominating. True mastery radiates, and the world feels it long before it understands it. But even in mastery, we remain human. We still bleed, we still care, we still love deeply. What changes is what happens after we feel. We do not collapse under the weight of heartbreak. We do not lash out under the pressure of anger. We do not paralyze under the chill of fear. We experience emotion without letting it consume identity. It becomes a part of the story, not the narrator of it. And in that balance, in that rare union of strength and sensibility, we discover a new form of freedom. A freedom untouched by circumstance, untouched by judgment, untouched by fate. The Roman general Cato once said that a man who conquers himself can never truly be conquered. And now, perhaps for the first time, those words are no longer a metaphor. They are a description of who we have become. That is why the world can no longer shake us. Not because it has softened, but because we have grown. We have learned to sit with emotion and remain whole. We have learned to walk through fire and remain ourselves. We have learned to release rather than cling, to observe rather than react, to act rather than collapse. Life will continue to test us with loss, betrayal, uncertainty, and endings, but every trial will reveal the same truth. We do not break anymore. We bend, we feel, we adapt, and then we rise. Again and again, until rising becomes instinct, until peace becomes identity, until emotional storms become nothing more than passing weather over a mountain that does not move. A life like this is not fantasy. It is built through choice. Thousands of choices made when emotion demanded surrender and we refused. And so we return, one final time, to the question that began everything. What if you learned to control everything you feel, and nothing could shake you? Now the answer stands in front of us, not as speculation, but as transformation. If you controlled everything you feel, you would still experience pain, but it would not own you. You would still face fear, but you would move anyway. You would still love, but without losing yourself. You would live not as a prisoner of impulse, but as the architect of your inner world. That is the life of the unshakable. That is the life of those who master themselves. That is the life waiting on the other side of discipline. And now, with the final word of this journey, the question no longer echoes unanswered, because now you already know.